about.
Maybe we should figure out how to do that, just it kind of takes the minutes, right?
Yeah, it takes me no,
can get going. We've basically got everyone here. Thank you, Patrick, for all of the setup, and Ammon for making us coffee. So there's coffee in the back too, if you guys want to grab a cup of coffee. And with that, I'll turn it over to
Are we good to go with the remote?
Looks good on my end. We don't have anybody that has joined the meeting.
Okay.
Did
Just
we
us in the
get,
room, but
did we get the transcription thing happening? We're gonna try to
No,
let
not yet.
AI use transcribing, and we can record
Did you
it
speak to
too.
Stephanie? She's not here.
Great ball.
That's a
Oh, yeah, Paul's here. Let's take a second and see if we can
Okay.
get we have a new tool to maybe transcribe our minutes for us. So we're gonna try letting Gemini AI transcribe our minutes.
Okay.
Save Cheryl some work. She works behind the scenes to try this. But I think while they're tinkering with that, we can probably go ahead and get started.
Here we go. Good morning. I'm Ken Fleck, Vice Chairperson of the Utah Geological Survey Board. I'd like to call this meeting of the Utah Geological Survey Board to order. It is now 8:30 a.m. on April 16th, 2025. This meeting is being held both in person and virtually with Google Meet. In compliance with Utah's open meeting laws, this meeting is being recorded in its entirety. This recording is classified as a public record. The following board members are in attendance: Dave Garbrecht, Ken Fleck, Becky Hammond, Neil Burke, Riley Brinkerhoff, absent Elissa Richards, Rick Chestnut, Stephanie Barberenteria. The following individuals representing the Utah Geological Survey and Department of Natural Resources are in attendance: Darlene Batatian, Russ Fillmore, Cheryl Wing. We welcome all visitors and interested persons at this time. As a courtesy to everyone participating in this meeting, at this time we ask for all cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices to be turned off and changed to silent mode. Board motions and votes must be reflected in the minutes and recorded by individual board members. Let us now proceed with the agenda. And on the agenda, first, welcome everybody. We have minutes from the previous board meeting that was held on January 15th, 2025, were sent in the board packet. I would take a motion now to approve those minutes or amend the minutes if necessary. Does anybody want to make that motion?
Move to accept the minutes for the January meeting.
Thank you, Riley.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We have a list also in that packet of the contract proposals that have been made since the last meeting, which most of us have approved online, but we will do a formal approval of all of those projects and proposals since the last meeting now. I will also accept a motion to accept or approve, those project proposals since the last meeting.
I move to approve those proposals.
Okay, Becky moves to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, they're approved. Moving along with the agenda now, we will have the director, Darlene, give her report.
Thank you for opening our meeting and thanks for your attendance today. So just a quick look back at our agenda. I'll go through some personal updates. I'll introduce our newest UGS staff member here. And then I'll do my update that includes our program updates. And Mark Milligan will present a legislative summary, and that'll take us to our break. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Jessica Stern. Jess is our new wetlands coordinator. Yay! So she has just joined the survey 2 weeks ago now. So if you remember, Diane Menus was our state wetlands coordinator, and she stepped back to a data analyst position. Becca Downard is the wetlands program manager, and just joined us. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was in Illinois, in central Illinois, before joining here. I got my master's at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and worked as a consultant while living in Illinois for the last 3 to 4 years. Incredibly excited to be in this position and to have the opportunity to work for UGS and help direct and implement the next version of the wetland program plan that I'll be working on. So lots of great opportunity here. New folks to reach out to. So
Ecology background or more geology or what kind of
sure,
background?
yeah. Wetland ecology. Yeah.
I forget that our wetlands ecologists are not geologists until I go out
Yeah.
in the field with them. And then I listen to all the backseat chatter with them, and it's all about plant phylogeny and taxa and birds
And like
and
hydric soil and getting into the muck.
and what the
Yeah.
best time of year is to go look for plants
Right.
and all that. So I have an idea for us to spend a little time with our wetlands team later. So I'll mention that, and we'll see if we can get you guys out in the field with them.
Yeah,
So
that'd be awesome. I'd be happy to take anybody out.
Jess has already hit the ground running. So thank you for joining
Yeah.
UGS. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you so
And
much.
thanks for taking time to get introduced to our board.
Of course. Yeah, thanks. So nice to meet you all.
And you're welcome to like take off. It's gonna be a long meeting with a lot of stuff.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, she's great. Hugh Hurlow, our groundwater and wetlands program manager, has been really excited about bringing Jessica over. So we're glad to have her here. Personnel updates. So retirement. I feel like we skipped a slide in here somewhere. In fact, let me just get out here and see if I could skip the slide. It just went away. So, sorry about that. Retirement. So Phil Keach, our director, retired effective March 31st. So thanks to everybody who took time to come to his retirement party here at the survey. He's actually having a get together tonight after work at Legends, I think from 5 to 7, and you're welcome to join us there. I'm gonna pop in for a little bit if you didn't get a chance to see him at the survey for his retirement party, please come and wish him well. And so in the meantime, you have me as acting or interim director and state geologist. That's okay. The process for, naming and appointing a new director is well underway. We actually expect an announcement soon. So stay tuned is all I can tell you. We'll know shortly and we'll send an announcement out. So, also, Lucy Jordan, a longtime groundwater hydrogeologist, has also officially retired from the survey. Lucy moved to Nevada where she spends a lot of her time. She still has a cabin here. So that triggered some complications with the employee management system with having out-of-state employees. She really, at this point, does technical peer reviews and editorial reviews for groundwater and wetlands papers. So she's kind of on an on-call basis anyways. And so we moved her to an on-call vendor contract and have completed the vendor procurement process for Lucy. So now we can just pay her when she needs to do a review, and we don't have to deal with all of the what hours is she in which state and all that kind of stuff. So she's still with the survey in the capacity where, she's a great asset to us, but it does cause her to officially retire from UGS. So that's a little sad. And then promotions. So Cheryl, I'm gonna put you on the spot again. I made a little speech about this at our staff meeting, but we have 2 admin leads who are really, really valuable to our organization. Cheryl has been at UGS in the state for 26 years.
Wow.
So she was like 12 when she started. And Star, I think, has been here for 16 or 19 years. So, and when Rick Alice, the director of the survey before Bill left, his executive secretary left also. And so they went from having 3 admin professionals to 2. Star and Cheryl stepped up and absorbed all of that extra work. And I think we had 55 or 60 people then, and we have 90 something now. And so they have just continued to shoulder a really big load for the survey. We could not do what we do without them. They book travel, they order equipment and supplies, they manage a bunch of HR stuff. Cheryl is our board secretary. And it was long past time for some sort of recognition for them, so we managed to get them promoted. And so I just want to say congratulations and thank you, Cheryl, for all you do for us. So, yay. And then Mark Milligan, who might be listening online. He's going to present a little bit later today on our leadership update, but Mark was just recognized with a DNR Employee Spotlight. For the value of Speak Up, Mark was our legislative liaison during the session, which kept him pretty busy. He actually, in this capacity, tracks all the bills and sees which ones may affect UGS or may not affect UGS. He communicates those to our team. He communicates that up into DNR. There's a big team of legislative liaisons from all of the DNR agencies. They're really busy. And because he was willing to step up and do all of that, Bill and I could step back from the actual like day-to-day, moment-to-moment tracking of where all of the bills were. I don't know who nominated them. Those are anonymous, but DNR selected Mark for an employee spotlight. So I just want to acknowledge all the work he did to help us survive the legislative session. It's busy. And then lastly, a service award. Janae Wallace has been with UGS for 35 years. Another really prominent hydrogeologist who has done a ton of work, particularly in community outreach, as we've done more and more groundwater resource studies, building relationships with some of the small towns and communities and rural areas that we work on is really important. We're in people's property and ranches, trying to get access to, small dams and weirs and other places where we monitor water. And Janae has built great relationships with, locals and towns as well. So I just want to acknowledge Janae's service. She's going to be retiring later this year. She's going to take a lot of institutional knowledge with her when she goes. So she's been awesome. Oh, here's the slide. This should have been at the beginning. We covered this, but here's Bill with his awesome plaque that we made for him.
Is that out of fibrous calcite?
Yes,
Honeycomb
we made that out of the honeycomb calcite. Mm-hmm. He had 2 pieces in his office, so I just blatantly stole one. I didn't think he'd mind. We gave it back.
He did notice it.
I know. He's like, weren't there 2 pieces here? It's like, I don't know anything about that. I'll just do a quick summary of our legislative funding because, this will tee up some of the conversations we'll have. Russ will cover our financial picture later, and Mark will cover the actual legislative impacts. But I just want to give you a quick summary that in addition to the $6 million for our general funds, the legislature did approve $1.75 million to UGS for Operation Gigawatt for our geothermal investigations. This is a really large single line item appropriation for UGS, and I want to congratulate our energy and minerals team for the work they did putting together this building block proposal. This proposal was originally a $5 million proposal. They told them to aim high. This originally went in as a $5 million proposal. I think it went into the governor's budget at $4.4 million. And was approved by the legislature at 1.75. This is quite a lot of money. We'll be able to do a lot of amazing work with this, including purchasing some equipment. including a new geoprobe, which is sort of a small, like ATV mounted push technology that we can use not only for shallow geothermal, borings, if you will, but we can use them for groundwater as well. It's just a really great piece of equipment. We do need to designate an operator for this, but that's kind of in the works. So the work plan for the geothermal investigations is underway. And then additionally, we did get our appropriation from the UGS restricted account. That will help us budget our balance our budget for this year. And Russ will go a little bit more into that. So overall, we came out of the legislative session pretty well. Let's talk about federal funding challenges, because I think this is probably the most important thing for you as our board to be aware of. After our last meeting, the new administration came in, and I'm sure you're all aware there was a lot of news about funding that was pulled back, that was related to the Biden infrastructure legislation, I forget all the acronyms, IRL, Jobs Act. And so it was kind of a roller coaster for us for about a month and a half, where contracts were frozen. And that, we built everything we could right away, just in case, because we really didn't know what was going to happen. So this was work that was signed, authorized, and those funds were obligated. And those are projects that we're underway and working on. So it was quite a potential risk for us to have those funds de-obligated, even though we already had signed contracts. Fortunately, that worked its way through the courts, and our contracts that have been signed and authorized were eventually released. So we are able to continue to work on those. Thankfully, we did just get one kind of last minute potential restriction on our FEMA brick grants that may restrict some of our management costs, but the science costs appear to not be impacted. And that was just kind of late. So we're still sorting through that. Future federal funding.
So has anything been blocked, or it's all through,
It's all now open again, except for the management costs on the 2 FEMA contracts that our hazards team works under. And that represents about $17,000, which out of, I think we have $350,000 left on those loans to, why do I keep calling them
grants?
Grants to continue to work on. I feel really fortunate that everything is continuing. So for the grants that we have already signed and authorized, we are steady as she goes. Future grants, we felt like those were very much at risk, but they're starting to actually come through and move forward again. State map funding appears to be viable. It may not be at the same levels that it was the last year or two, but actually, if we look at Stephen Kirby's charts of the amount of state map funding that we've been able to capture, it's really been quite a bit of an increase over the last couple of years. So if it drops back down a little bit, we're going to be okay. So we will just dial back on the number of maps that we try to do. So we'll adjust our scope accordingly. Earth MRI, both of these are DOI projects. So Earth MRI also appears committed to provide funding for critical minerals research. So Stephanie Mills is submitting a proposal shortly to tap into that funding stream. So far, I would say that, things are not horrible considering. And I think that one of the bright spots for the survey is really this. The work that we do is really part of national and state strategic priorities, right? Critical minerals, fuels, oil and gas, geothermal, and our vital water resources. And Utah is really committed to, the Great Salt Lake and, water and minerals and fuels. So, and the geologic mapping that underpins this. I don't know if you guys saw the news report from Secretary of the Interior, Doug Wagum, that was like the baby map, kind of work priorities statement that he made, which was, we're gonna go out and we're gonna, we're gonna support advanced, scientific research, and we're gonna support locating all of these resources, and we're gonna baby map. And I gave a silent cheer when I heard that he understands the importance of mapping and geologic mapping. And then, yeah, so this is where I think UGS, on both the state level, state funding, and our the outlook for us on federal funding, I'm less worried than I was in January and February. So, and Russ is gonna help us figure out if we can get out of the woods or not. So, we have had more attention to our in-house financial management. Some of the things that we kind of unpacked as we took a look into our budget and whether we were meeting our revenue targets really showed that we had some opportunity to be better about capturing the grant revenue that we do have. So if we project, I'm just going to throw some numbers out, that we have $1 million in grant revenue, but we don't bill to those grants and we only capture 500,000 or 600,000, we're going to miss our revenue projection by $300,000 or $400,000, and that's a lot of money. All that money comes out of our general funds. And so it really started by looking into the time that our TLs, our term limited employees, were billing to grants, and they were just way off from their projected billing. Some of it was they were like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to use this code instead of just billing to general funds. Maybe their supervisors weren't really looking for all of that when they were signing timesheets. This is just kind of basic financial housekeeping. So we've really worked to get that in line. And also making sure that our support services, editorial, publication, data management, is also charging to grant projects when they're working on those grant projects, as much as that contract allows them to do. So again, this is just kind of some really basic timekeeping stuff, super easy. We can get better at this. We have already gotten better at it. We've been working on this for a couple of months. So it's already resulted in increased capture of grant revenue, and we are working to close that gap between our projected budget, the amount of revenue that we have available from grants, and what we'll actually capture by the end of the fiscal year. And then moving into next fiscal year, this is really important. It's going to help Russ get us closer to balancing our budget. At the same time, and I think some of this just comes from being in consulting, right, where we have a little bit of a different outlook on how we manage grants. Taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture with what grants we actually chase and how we're scoping those grants. So I've asked our staff to have proposal kickoff meetings now, where they bring in the team that's going to work on the grant, including the data management people and the editorial and publication folks, so that we're accounting for the whole scope of people that are working on our grants. We look at the cost share. Our cost share, the portion that UGS kicks in for a grant, runs anywhere from 0, where we just get 100% of grant funds, to 50% cost share on some proposals like State Map. That's a lot of cost share, right? That money comes out of our general funds. And what it does basically is it obligates our general funds to pay a certain amount into a grant. And I think one of the reasons why our budget has run into, some challenges is that as our ability to capture grants has grown, that cost share has also grown. And so now it kind of sets aside a whole bunch of money that's basically allocated to support grants. And our support staff, our data management, some of our other people in our organization who aren't supported by grants now have less money to work with. So really looking at the cost share, looking at our overhead, making sure that our staff are appropriately allocated and that they're not, we're not allocating staff where they're like supposed to work 1,900 hours a year, because that's not really feasible, right? Just being really thorough and intentional and considering all of this it's already helped us. I think our data management team has already captured like 25% of their time allocating to grants, and before it was way less than that. So we're getting better, and I would like you guys to know that we're actively working on this. So, and really a lot of this is, you get better by coaching and training, right? So Ben DeLynn has also automated some contract management tools that make it easier for our program managers and project managers to see where they're at in their budget immediately. So we're making a lot of progress on this, and I think that'll help. Yes.
Question is, cost share seems like the ones that I see are almost always 50%. This way and that. Can that be changed?
Yes. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. So it kind of depends on the contract. Sometimes they'll state the cost share in the contract.
Who is they in that?
Whatever agency we're
proposing
looking at. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Ken, 50% is pretty common for USGS.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of our funding
Yeah.
comes from.
And that's what you would expect to get. Okay.
And in fact, if you want to go back and look at these, well, actually, you know what? We could start putting the expected cost share into these proposal summaries, and that might be helpful for our board to see also. So we'll start allocating the cost share in. So typically USGS asks us for 50%. But like forestry, fire, and state lands, I don't think there's a cost share for FFSL. This is a sister agency for DNR. This is a pass through for us. So I don't think that there's a cost share from forestry, fire, and state lands proposals. But it really does make a difference. We'll bring a chart to you next time and show you guys what that looks like. Okay, just a little bit about looking forward. Some of the other things that, as I've peeked under the hood in the year or so that I've been here, there is a lot of opportunity for us to increase our collaboration with stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean people that are interested in and use UGS's data and science. That could be sister agencies at DNR, like DOGM, Oil, Gas, and Mining, Water Resources and Water Rights, PLIPCO, which is a Public Lands Policy and Information Office for the state. They've actually been in our office more looking for information on critical minerals on federal lands and distribution of oil and gas resources on federal lands. So we're really engaging with them quite a bit. It could be industry, UPA and UMA. I think our technical professionals are meeting with industry professionals, but peer-to-peer at the director level. I think we can increase our exposure and visibility to UGS for this. This kind of came about because our data is being used, and particularly our energy and minerals team doesn't feel like UGS is really getting credit or recognition for all of that underlying work that we provide to kind of underpin industry. And that's on us. That's on us to do a better job, to really be talking about the work that we do, to be pushing that information out and meeting our industry partners and meeting people where we are. I would love your input as a board about where you think we can be visible, where we can engage with stakeholders for UGS, and what you'd like to see from us on that. So that's an invitation to be a partner with us as we kind of reach out and increase our conversation with stakeholders. And if you guys have any thoughts about that right now, I'm all ears.
I mean, a couple things that, just going to energy and minerals. We ran that core workshop in February.
Yes.
And every major operator from the Lunar Basin oil and gas play right now that came out to that. And, that was led by Mike Vandenberg and Ryan Dahl. You've already had several groups come back using that. So, that was good where it was UGS guys leading it. It was a UGS facility, and of course with the core here. If you talk to Hammond, you've already had people come back from it, and we'll have probably that continue to go on all fall. Last fall, we had the RMS conference up in Park City. And again, so much of the leadership was directed from UGS. That, you have to still look for it, but UGS had a booth there. A lot of different talks came
Yeah, a
from
lot of presentations.
UGS employees. So, where they may not be getting credit is some of the data they kicked out and papers. But even this week, I'll be going down a bunch of SM folks. That's the largest operator right now in Utah. And all of the measure sections we're looking at come right from Ryan Gall.
Oh, nice.
Have his name on it, have your guys' logo big.
Thank you.
So they do see your guys' stuff a lot. Could you do more? Obviously, of course, you always do more. But I don't think that people are unaware, just because it's been such a big piece of at least the oil and gas story.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great feedback. Yeah, I dropped into the core workshop off and on. I was really impressed by the quality of information that Ryan and Mike were presenting, by the work that had gone into laying out all of the core and the attention.
Hammond's got to get good. He slept out a full vertical mile of core. That's tons and tons of rock.
Pretty amazing.
I don't know how his arms moved at the end of that.
They're asking if they can do that as an annual thing. Operators love to keep doing that.
If Mike and Ryan and Ammon are willing to do it, I think that would be amazing.
And the
So,
operators are willing to pay too. So we did it free this year. Charge those pikers a little bit of money.
okay. Why don't you take the temperature of people about what would be fair to do that for? Put the money into our core fund so we can buy Ammon a new furnace every now and then. It was like 65 degrees here when I walked in. I was like, we'll pay his heating bill at least. Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. Thank you. If you guys ever think of opportunities or see a conference or something where you think UGS, could and should be present, shoot me an email and I will put it on my calendar.
GSA is going to be in May in Provo, and you guys have some speakers.
Oh, we have like 20 talks that we're giving. I'll cover that
You'll
in
have
a
people
little
there.
bit. Yes. The conference costs don't get sticker shock when you see the conference costs for us to register everybody, but that's a great opportunity. That's peer-to-peer science research. We need to be there. Russ has been really supportive of conference expenses. Some of it can be charged back to grants. But if going forward, I am, UGS's new director, we'll find out soon. My plan is to be out more and be visible in industry, and I could really use your help with, where do you think I should be?
So what conference are you talking about?
It's GSA, so.
Oh, GSA. Oh,
Yeah,
so
GSA Rocky
section
Mountain
meetings,
section
yeah,
in
all right.
Provo in like mid to late May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the Utah Water Users Conference in St. George annually. It would probably be good. The USGS has a booth.
We had
and
three speakers.
Yeah, the
Were you at
UGS has
that?
always been good about
Yeah.
Presenting, but.
Yes, and I
might
would have
be worth
been
considering.
there, but I had some kind of conflict during that. And I don't remember what it was, but I wasn't able to be there. But a bunch of people from DNR went down there. I think Joel Ferry was a key
Yeah,
speaker.
Yeah.
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 Good. Thank you for the reminder on that. I'm going to put that on my calendar early so that it doesn't get booked over. But that's a great conference also. It sounded like it was really well attended.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's the largest water conference in the state.
Thank you.
Or the premier water conference. in the
Thank
state.
you. Okay, great. Good to hear. There was just a trade mission to Canada. So Utah stood up a trade mission focused on critical minerals and nuclear. The survey provided quite a bit of background information. Steph Mills, who's our metallic minerals lead, provided a lot of data on, current companies that are working in Utah, where are our resources, and fed that all to DNR. To be honest, UGS was invited to attend that conference. It was right after the legislative season, right before Bill was leaving. There was a transition going on. I didn't feel like it was the right time for me to go to something like that. Also, there was quite a hefty price tag attached to it because it's run by World Trade Center Utah, and they charge a really steep fee. So I stepped back. I felt like we had done our part by providing basic information. But there was some news, great news that came out of that. I think one of the outcomes may be that some of our agencies will collaborate on preparing a critical minerals strategic plan for Utah. There's a model strategic plan that Quebec prepared. I'm happy to share that with you guys if you want to take a look at it, if you're curious about it. But I think that would be a really great plan to stand up for Utah. So we'll be doing a debrief and potentially talking about this, but that could be really exciting. And again, I mentioned that we're working with PLIPCO. That's DNR's and the state's Public Lands Policy and Information Office. I'm not sure I got that acronym right, but again, kind of focusing on critical minerals and oil and gas. They're actually taking a reporter out on Friday to look at oil and gas leases on federal lands in the Paradox Basin area. There's been asking a lot of questions. So, and then really to help us with all of this effort, Ben DeLynn, who is our contracts analyst, he reports to Russ. And Russ has agreed to allow Ben to spend 15 to 20% of his time as our public information officer. And this has been really exciting. Ben's background is actually in marketing and communications and strategy, and he has a master's degree in natural resources. So he's a great fit for this. And so he has really already started to kind of elevate our push of information out. Yes.
Ben is at this moment talking to ABC for scheduling an interview about the Great Shakeout. So he is
Awesome.
using that 20% of his time right now.
Exactly that kind of thing. So, and he really steps up. We had a PIO part-time assigned to us in the past. It's a great asset to be able to deploy Ben. So, and then another looking forward thing, again, I've already put a time slot on our program managers and, leadership time, including Russ, to kick off a strategic planning process. And the reason that I think that it's important to do this now, we just had our 75th anniversary. If you kind of look back at UGS, we've sort of evolved from back in the day when we used to make geologic maps with, air photos and a topo and an altimeter and a Brunton and, come back and draft it up in the office, and the publication process involved with that, to, bringing online all these digital tools, right, which are really advanced now. And the tools are advanced and the people have these skills, but I think some of the processes that we have and some of the ways that we approach our work maybe haven't really evolved. I think it's a good time to take a step back. We've also added programs, we've added people, we have different funding sources. So I think it's a good time to step back and really look at UGS as who we are as an organization. So I call it, step one is return to mission. What does our statute say about what we're supposed to be doing for the state of Utah? And then how do we use that to assign work priorities, right? What should we be focusing on? And are we in alignment right now with what our statute says? Does our staffing line up with those work priorities? Do we need more mid or senior level scientists? We've had quite a lot of retirements of senior staff at the top, and we've brought in a lot of younger people at the bottom. Do we have enough of those mid-level people to really fuel the science engine that we are. And then lastly, do we have funding in line with all of those priorities? So I think it's just time to take a big step back and really look if we're in alignment and what changes we might want to make to bring that all into alignment. We have a great opportunity to think in some new and different ways about who we are and what we do for the state. So that's a process I'd like to go through. It's going to start with a meeting of the program managers in May. I'd like to bring in kind of mid-level people after that. I'd like to bring our board into that process. And I think you guys have probably all been through some sort of strategic planning process. At some point, it really needs to touch everybody in our organization and get information back up from everybody in our organization as well. You get buy-in and alignment when people have been involved and have been heard. So we have a great team at UGS. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say about this. Okay, new publications. Trying to do a little more celebrating about our new publications that we have. So this is 30 by 60 Duchesne. This was open file. No, this went into a map series. So yeah, this is final. So great map, huge area. Thanks to Doug Sprinkle, Stephen Kirby for kind of directing this process. But there's a whole bunch of people that touch these maps whose names are not in this authorship, right? It's our, GIS team, it's our data management people, our editorial and publications. The pamphlet, I would invite you to read the pamphlet that goes along with this map because Doug is an excellent writer. There were stratigraphic decisions that were made about naming formations and where to break formations. I never really got the chance to map with Doug. He's a fantastic mapper, and this is a really great publication.
It's a work of art, in my opinion.
It really is. You know what? I have a copy of this in my office. I should have brought it in. It's a beautiful map. It really is. I mean, they're just, plus geologic maps are just really pretty anyways, right? I'm going to brag on one of our younger term TLs, term limited employees. Ethan is like 25. I think he's the same age as my son. He might even be a little younger than that. Ethan toils away in our paleo lab right here, door closed, in relative obscurity, picking fossils. And he is such a young, up-and-coming celebrity in the paleo world. It is a big deal to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. This is not a UGS article. This is a peer-reviewed journal, Active Paleontology. He had one other co-author. It basically identified a new Tyrannosaurus rex from Montana. I've reviewed this paper. It's one of my jobs, right? It's just to read through these, and I had to look up a whole bunch of new words about paleontology and taxonomy that I didn't know. Brilliant paper. He's gonna go far in the world. So I want to celebrate Ethan for his and I'm sorry, I should have put a photo of the cover of this as well. But Andrew Rupke put out an estimate of lithium, magnesium, and potassium resources in Great Salt Lake brine. This is actually really important work. We have lithium companies doing pilot testing even on the north arm of the Great Salt Lake right now. So very timely paper. Lithium is, all the news right now, and lithium in brines is really a very timely research. And the dynamics of these solutes and their seasonality and concentrations is really interesting. And how they're replenished from some sort of mysterious inflow into the lake. So there's a lot more work to be done on brine chemistry, I think, but this is a really great paper, and, potentially high value resources for Utah. So thanks to Andrew. He's awesome. He's a really brilliant guy. Okay, upcoming events. We mentioned GSA Rocky Mountain section. It's in Provo this year. There were I think we basically told our staff that they couldn't go unless they presented a paper. So there are 27 abstracts, which is phenomenal. I think we're probably carrying this conference in terms of, really showing up with the science. So really proud of our team.
Your field trips are also led by your guys.
Yeah.
The Nicholas field trip is led by UGS.
Yes, I'm actually trying to, that's not full, is it? Because I want to sign up.
It might be. I would check that real quick.
I'm going to look. Okay. I would actually like to go on that field trip. We were able to capture a registration discount for the number of people that we have. The registration, and who tracked all of this? Adam McKean built a giant spreadsheet to track all of this. The registration's about $5,000, but about a little more than half of that is actually allocated to grant funding, and we don't need to pay for travel. So that makes it really easy for people to attend. We're additionally going to have an exhibitor booth staffed by our bookstore manager, Michelle, I think. And then we're going to rotate staff through that booth as well. And we're getting a floater badge or two, so people who aren't presenting can still go down for a day or so and check out the conference. I think Russ and I are on the same page about really wanting to support our staff and their ability to go to these types of conferences. It's so important to not only be presenting, but absorbing science and having that peer-to-peer conversation is really, really important. These are great opportunities.
Do you know what the dates are?
I think it's the 18th through the 23rd of May. Yeah, and registration is open if you're thinking about attending. And if you want to come down for a day, we might be able to give you a floater badge or something.
Count board members, you can get 28 abstracts. I got an abstract down there. Count everything you can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll count that. I'll add it to my list. Along the same lines, there's a Utah Geographic Information Council meeting. So these are our GIS professionals. We're going to send, I think, 7 people up to Logan. That will involve some travel. It's too far for most people to drive back and forth for the day. I think it's a 4-day conference. So we've got some funds allocated for that. And then just found out that there's a Cloud Native Geo conference at Snowbird. We're going to send one person, one of our developers, up to Snowbird. So we'll cover his conference registration. I think that's a 3-day conference also. He's having ankle surgery the day before, so he can't drive. We're gonna have to Uber him up and down the Snowbird, but I was like, can he ride the bus? But I think the ski bus is like not gonna be around. And also he would have to like somehow get to the bus stop. He's like gonna be on like one of those knee scooters. Just Uber him.
What does cloud native mean?
It's some sort of coding platform that they use for something. I got an explanation of it, and I'll be honest, I'm not a coder developer, so Clinton would love to tell you all about it. Would you like a debrief when he comes back?
I'll pass.
Okay.
Wouldn't mean anything.
Yep. And then last year we did a high school internship with Slixie. It was super successful. The students loved it. It was a big lift for our team to welcome these interns in. So we're retooling how we manage the internship program a little bit, but we're going to obligate some funds to support 2 high school interns for 8 weeks, 2 days a week. And it's also great for our team to have the opportunity to mentor those students. So I think it's great both ways. We get a lot out of it as well.
Do you just advertise for the local high schools here nearby, or how do you do it?
There is a high school nearby, the Salt Lake Center for
Science Education, Slixie. It's it's the old Rose Park Middle School is their campus. And that's who we've reached out to because they're local. We have talked about opening it to other schools, but that's what we did last year.
our 2 interns. We had 2 young women last year, and they just soaked it up, and they were really thrilled with the experience. They wrote really nice cards to the,
Came back and volunteered at our science week. That was great.
yeah, it was really great.
And I think they talked it up a lot at the school. I think other students are interested in science because of it.
And we're gonna pay them. So, with 2 days a week, if they want to have another summer job, they can. Your field trip, our dates are scheduled for September 18th and 19th. I'm wondering if you guys would like to do maybe a local trip and go look at wetlands and some of the wetlands work that we're doing around the edge of the Great Salt Lake. We've got some nested wells out there that are at different depths. Hugh's got some great, that team's got some great data back from some of those wells. We're gonna be putting in some additional wells around the perimeter of the Great Salt Lake. It turns out we really don't understand groundwater flow into the Great Salt Lake all that well. So these additional wells will help support some of that work. Got some other ideas, but we could do 1 day, we could do 2 days. If we do it locally, we don't need to travel and do hotels. If you guys would prefer to get away and you'd like leaving for 2 days, let me know. I know everyone's really busy. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Good idea.
Well, we did the Great Salt Lake, what was that, 3 years ago?
I missed that.
To the jetty.
Yeah, we went,
Did the wildlife, what's the name of the wildlife refuge that we did on the Farmington Bay side?
Farmington Bay? Yeah, the Eccles Center?
Yes, that's, yeah, we
Apple
started
Center?
there. And then went up to the jetty.
Up to Spiral Jetty?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
you
that was
saw
interesting, 'cause
that.
the North Arm was at its very lowest.
Uh-huh.
We walked out to it and you had a whole beach made out of just crystallized salt.
Mirabolite. Mike Vandenberg's favorite thing.
Oh, yeah. We got a couple pictures out of it. But we didn't do any of the subsurface stuff. I mean, so if you have any wells and things, it's a big topic of conversation with a lot of research dollars going to it.
Yes. There was also the aqueduct replacement that was done to re-engineer the aqueduct across the Weber Aqueduct across the Wasatch Fault. Huge project.
Yeah.
We did get a tour of that as well.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Really cool.
Anything else you guys would like to see?
Just kind of where's your focus going to be next year too? If you want to get forward.
Yeah, you guys can think about it. We haven't, we have a little time to think about it. Shoot some emails around. We can share emails between us about what you guys might want to take a look at. So just want to make sure that all of our programs get a little attention time. I have one other idea, but I need to think about it before I pitch it out there because I don't want to get everybody's hopes up. And then our next board meetings. So these dates should be on your calendar. Cheryl has sent out meeting invites, I believe, for all of these. So they should be on your calendar. I know if it's not on my calendar, I will book something right over the top of it. So those should be on your calendar. And it does help us if you can RSVP. And then our board terms and applications. 2 of the seats that are expiring this month, I believe, have been renewed. So Becky and Riley, your terms are renewed through 2029. And then Rick Chestnut and Dave, your seats are open. We have applications for those. This is on me. I haven't had time to review those applications, so I apologize. And I also thank Dave for coming in and sitting with us today. So we will move those forward. I'll take time to review those hopefully next week. I think the dust will have settled a little bit. So, and then we refer those candidates to the Utah boards and commissions and they tee them up for Senate confirmation. So we'll get that process back on track. And then everyone should be renewed through the middle of 2027. So that's great. Okay, program updates. Does anybody need like a little break or anything? I know we have a break set for 9. Mark, do you want to skip ahead to your legislative presentation?
It's up to you. The secret is I can get more done sitting here than in my office. I'm happy either way. Nobody can find me here.
We're scheduled for a break at 9:30, so why don't we take a break? We'll do Mark's legislative update, and then if he wants to continue to hide in the center, he can. How about that?
Okay, 10 minutes.
10-minute break?
Yeah.
And it's gonna clock us. Okay, I can like dive into this donut now.
How many donuts?
Go ahead and start.
I didn't see him out there.
Well, first off, thank you for volunteering on our board. We greatly appreciate it. This year's legislative session was even busier than last year. Last year was my first year as legislative liaison, and there were a whopping 942 bills introduced. That's bills and resolutions last year, and we had more this year. So we keep getting record. Hopefully that ends, but we'll see. 582 were passed. Every time a bill or any piece of legislation is introduced, there's a system that tags sections of code, and we get a notification if our sections of code are tagged, and we have to put a fiscal impact note in on those bills. Most all the time it's just no impact, but we still have to read through the bill. Sometimes there's Easter eggs in there that we find. And Ben DeLynn has been helping on this as well. So thank you, Ben, on that. It was a busy session. So to start going through these, they're in numerical order, not order of importance. House Bill 160, professional license degree amendments, Representative Gracious. This bill struck language that required an accredited, a degree from an accredited university. The representative wanted alternative paths to licensure. Unfortunately, I don't think this does that. What we would have liked would have been, like, we have an employee that has a PhD in geography, but it's a very geology-based geography degree. Those are the types of alternative paths we would have loved. Bill reached out directly to Gracious, and UGA members also reached out, and we got pushback. I think part of what happened was there were other professions in this bill, and they reached out before us, and she took engineers out of the bill, and at some point she was like,
so it wasn't just for geologists.
No, it was licensure wide.
so multiple professions, and some of them got removed and ours didn't. In reality, you still have to pass the ASBOG exam to get your license, and we don't know of any non-accredited universities issuing degrees, so I don't even know. Practically, I don't see any difference.
Same. But the point that you bring up is well taken, and that's actually, those opportunities for alternate paths is something that we can address in our double licensure regulations.
Sure.
And so let's
there
bring
is some room
those
in
to our
those
double
regs.
PG board.
Yeah, there's some room in those regs for
Discretion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. House Bill 249, nuclear power amendments, Albrecht. This bill created a nuclear energy consortium in the Office of Energy Development. Our concern with it, there were no codified requirements for geologic hazards expertise on this board. We talked with OED and the Department of Natural Resources, our admin. They are both very aware of the need for that expertise, especially when citing anything or proposing any sites. There's plenty of examples of other states where oodles and oodles of money was spent on a site that was not gonna ever work. So they are aware of that. My worry is that that knowledge gets lost sometime between now and whenever anything happens, but that's what we have at the moment. They didn't want to go back and change the language. It was already going through. I don't know, but that's what we have. That's what passed. House Bill 352, geologic carbon storage amendments. This is geared towards getting Utah primacy over class 6 injection wells, which are carbon dioxide storage. It gives Oil, Gas, and Mining Enforcement Authority and civil and criminal penalties for people that break rules. So that's what that one was about. It doesn't directly affect us, but we do a lot of work on carbon sequestration projects. House Bill 355, mining and critical infrastructure materials amendments. We do a lot of work on sand, gravel, aggregate. So this just gives operators expanded rights to progress, extend, enlarge, or grow on contiguous land, so that control for May 7th, 2025. Just we monitored it because Snyder, Representative Snyder, he does a lot of bills that affect mining, and a lot of his bills have a lot of changes. He proposes some pretty aggressive or interesting bills, and then they get modified. So that's one we watched for that.
What's the significance of that date?
Grandfathering.
Yeah, I don't have a clear answer. Originally, that date wasn't in there, and the bill was conserving for non-operators because it kind of meant that you could keep acquiring adjacent lands, and so that kind of drew a line in the sand, but I don't know why May 7th. House Bill 412, boards and commissions. So this is directly affects UGS board. This language, no more than 4 members may be of the same political party, is stricken, so that's no longer a requirement. I know with at least other non-UGS boards, there were workarounds to that requirement. This is not just a UGS board change, it's other boards too. So in practicality, it probably doesn't make much difference, but that's no longer there going forward.
We don't care what party you're a member
Yeah.
of.
And I've looked at some boards and kind of like, why are 4 members of these third parties that probably have 5 people in the party? Well, it was because of this language. So, but that's no longer there.
Yeah, well, I thought it was very strange when I
Me
applied,
too.
because it's like, well, what does it matter for geologists?
I know.
I could see it if it were a different board.
There's no rulemaking authority here.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
other board. I mean, UGS is unique in that we don't regulate. So, or other boards out, not UGS, it might make a bit of a difference, but it's been stricken from most of them.
Well, that was a weird question though, when
I know, it's one of those questions
Somebody
you're
from the
like,
governor's
excuse
office?
me?
So what party are you? Like,
I know, it feels a little
I don't know,
invasive.
it says Republican, so I can vote in the primary, but bad Republican, I don't know, what do you want to hear?
Well, the
There's
question
a drop
should
down
be asked.
menu
in
under that where you have to answer some more
Yeah.
questions.
Okay, SJR, so Senate Joint Resolution 11, and this is just a resolution, but it highlights Utah's mining history and potential for critical minerals, and it recommends an industry working group. Stephanie Mills, our metalliferous minerals geologist, is reaching out to Senator Milner with our critical minerals report and other information, just as an outreach opportunity to educate somebody that could be a potential ally for the UGS, but she has an interest in this. So that's why that is on there. And then we can play the sad music, failed bills. Senate Bill 247, severance tax revenue amendments, Hinkins. This was the bill that we had hoped would change our percentage of severance tax from 2.5 to 5%. It was reduced from 5 to 3.5, so 1% increase, and it failed on the Senate floor. We had pushback from Utah Petroleum Association.
Why?
So Ricky was concerned that we were taking drops out of the bucket. And it is a bucket, so state general funds is where this money goes. And she was concerned that we were taking money out of that wouldn't filter in some way to other programs. We think that was misguided concern.
Was the EPA pushing to try and take more of that to different county levels?
No, and I don't, can I step in?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't wanna push all this onto industry. It was also, I think, DNR's concern that maybe we didn't know how much we really needed, right? I mean, our overall funding picture has changed over the last few years. And so my conversation about kind of right-sizing our organization and how much money do we really need to support that and support the work we do, we need to get clear on that. So that when we do go ask for something like that, we have a strong plan and a justification for what we're requesting. I think for Ricky, it was also like, well, you know, some of this money is supposed to be going to, say, build roads in rural counties, right? And that kind of thing. And so this is sort of part of us telling our story about what we do give back to Utah with the money that we are given from our severance account. And so this, I think, may go to an interim study. And so we will really work on building a communications plan around what we're doing with that money, how we're giving, you know, back to industry and supporting that industry with these funds, and what else it does to help UGS.
So I'm happy to call Ricky. Push back if you like.
I would say just hold
off.
on that, because again, I don't want to push this on industry. I think a lot of this withdrawal of this came from DNR also. So
They were pushing at their annual, the UPA annual meeting, that they were trying to get a lot of that sent back to the counties for local impacts.
You were also, I believe, concerned that it could set precedent in other agencies.
I think that we will
Similar
actually be successful in getting additional severance tax revenue. But we will take the time to build a better case for UGS.
I think that was the lesson we learned from this, is some preemptive outreach work that
Yes.
we didn't realize we needed until this.
So that bullet point I had about raising our visibility with stakeholders, that's partly a lesson learned from this as well. So I want to take that and use it as an opportunity for UGS.
House Bill 513, Utah Commission for Earthquake Preparedness. This would have essentially replaced the Utah Seismic Safety Commission, which was allowed to sunset last year. Like last year's USSC bill, it pretty much sailed through the House and then hit the wall in the Senate. At least one senator on the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee that spoke against it, he was under the impression that Be Ready Utah is good enough. It's a earthquake program that the state has. It's not anything like what the Seismic Safety Commission or the Commission for Earthquake Preparedness was doing or would have done, but that's where it died in the House. So I don't know, Darlene, do you have anything to add? Because Darlene was working with others outside of UGS on this bill.
Yeah, this is actually something that's really important to me personally, is Utah's ability to be resilient and recover from that 7.0 or greater earthquake that we're expecting, which, by the way, the Great Shakeout is tomorrow at 10:15. And so I worked with some of the former commission members really to try to recast and refocus this earthquake commission, you know, and sort of shift their focus from, to be honest, the conversation about unreinforced masonry buildings in schools was maybe not the best conversation to be having with the legislature. They don't want to regulate those communities, and they don't want to take on the liability for that. But there's a whole nother conversation to be had about economic readiness and infrastructure preparedness in advance of an earthquake, and that's where the focus really can be. And the legislature has shown willingness to, you know, they put up $50 million for aqueduct hardening, right? The two major aqueducts where they cross the fault. So, you know, my take on this was, let's bring that conversation to the legislature. They really can do a lot of work and help the commission. But there was just, I think they're not ready to really take that on again. It's something I'm talking to DNR about, maybe hosting a task force for. Not sure how to move that forward right now. There is a community of people, you know, that are former seismic safety commissioners that do want to continue this work, and maybe they just need to stand up their own organization outside of the legislative body to do that. Maybe hosted under DNR, I'm not sure. To be honest, with the immense cutback in FEMA funding, it's going to really change Utah's Department of Emergency Management and Response, and how prepared they're going to be, you know, to respond to an event. So there's a lot of work yet to be done with this. So Steve Bowman in our office is a
really great asset for earthquake preparedness and response. So it's something I'm asking him if he can help step up and work on as well.
I'll add also that this situation is deja vu all over again. When the Utah Seismic Safety Commission was created, I don't recall the year, it was after a hiatus. A previous commission had been sunsetted, and what changed that time was Genevieve Atwood in the legislature
Championing it.
and that's how we got the Utah Seismic Safety Commission. So if you have extra time, you could consider running for the Utah legislature. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Why don't we give Russ an opportunity to talk about financials, and then that'll tell me how much time I have left to breeze through our programs overview. So, Russ. And the buttons to advance the slides are just that down button or up button. Okay, go back. And I'll help you with the Excel. Yep. There you go. Okay.
So good morning. Been asked to give an update on UGS financial position for period ending March 31st. I gave a chart in the director's notes showing the revenues and expenses through March of 2024 compared to March of 2025. And if you look at that table, you can see that revenues are down and expenses are up, which you would expect with just the cost of living and wages and just and for state government always is big part of our work is field work and travel policy change, specifically with going from state rates for lodging and meal per diem to the GSA rate. So, and also some of the system things that we changed, travel systems, and some of the fees that were charged as a division for, per travel booking for hotels, also airfare and things like that, which will also increase next year as well. But bottom line for UGS, we expect to end the year with a carry forward balance of $753,000. That is made up of three parts. The $30,901 is for the Great Salt Lake groundwater studies, $287 for Bonneville Salt Flats, one-time general fund received years ago from the general fund, and then also critical minerals, an ending balance going into fiscal year 26 of $265,000. So that's what makes up the $253,000, projected at the end of the year. And just looking at this report, it's kind of small, so my apologies. You look at the left side of the report, you can see our budget information. That first line for general fund, that's our operating budget that comes from fixed general fund for, the $5 million.
I'm getting old, Danny.
943.
Zoom in on that just a little bit. I didn't know I was getting old, but my kids told me the other day.
Thank you.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'll just scroll down. That works.
Thanks.
And then you see some of these other things. This 400,000 is the critical minerals. You see this fund 1137 is our severance account, our UGS restricted account.
That's the 2.5% off severance.
What's that?
The 2.5% that come off severance.
2.5%. And then you can see mineral lease. We have no mineral lease. We have no mineral lease because all of our mineral lease goes into our restricted account That was a fix they had to make in this last general session. This will be a benefit to UGS going forward in the future, as that fund can build up.
Don't they have the ability to sweep that fund? Wasn't that the problem?
That what happens every year into the mineral lease. And then a little bit of money for this land exchange distribution, which is another restricted account. In the past, it's been bigger, but now it's very small amount that comes into our budget. And then these parts right here, from dedicated credits, expendable receipts, federal funds, and transfers are outside funding. These are our collection revenues that we, as we work on a specific study, through USGS, industry, or another federal agency. Transfer funds come from another state agency. Most of that, like water rights, where we contract with them to, perform specific deliverable. And then the non-lapsing funds or general funds that are non-lapsed from the previous year. This column here, the gray column, is our year-to-date collection. So the whole goal year-to-date is that to support our budget year-to-date through March 31st, this is how much general funds we need. Collections revenue looking from the dedicated credits through transfers is 2.2 million. And then also on the expenditure side of the ledger, same concept. These are actuals year-to-date. And the chart on the right up reflects those numbers. And then we have projections for what do we expect for the rest of the year based on the information that we have. And you can kind of see the impact here. We're not going to collect what we expect to collect, what we budgeted, and that's just an adjustment. We get behind on projects, we reprioritize projects, as we have to make decisions on what work we're going to perform with limited staff and limited time. And for personnel, you can see here, budgeted here we're budgeted $11,426,000. We have people retire, so this generates a cost savings to our division. And this sometimes it goes the other way where we really do need to promote somebody and pay them more money or something like that. So it's a little bit more expensive for some of those positions. But for overall, vacancy cost savings of about $100,000. We know, with 3 months left in the year, we know we're not going to get to the 15.9 million, and we know we're not going to get to the 15.2. But projection wise, based on what we know, this is where we're ending up at, is the 753.
Can I point something out?
Sure.
So up
53
here
shortfall?
on your federal.
Positive.
Positive.
Yeah, carry forward.
This is a positive number. So basically, Russ is saying we forecast to be 753 up, but a lot of those funds are committed. They're earmarked for these projects. But Russ, if you can just scroll up a little bit, I want to talk about this offset, and if we can see the titles up there also. So if you can see the headers. Okay, so this difference between the forecasted and budgeted federal funds, that's $525,000 that we're not going to capture. Kind of that story I told about, how we're billing and coding, maybe doing work that's not funding related when we have the opportunity to do that type of funding work. So we're going to be giving this a little bit more attention. Some of this can be pushed forward into FY26 with no cost extensions, but we don't have those locked and loaded yet. So again, this is a miss for me and an opportunity for us to really be asking our staff how we can do better on that, if that's fair to say.
Yeah. Always do better as far as type coding. You're working on 6 projects. Neil knows how it works. So you're really busy. And how do you prioritize your time to, make your supervisor and deliver, finish the deliverable on time based on what the grantor is expecting. And just because, we're not going to get to these numbers, we're not going to get to this 15.9 million, and we're not going to get to this. And the big reason, those numbers anyways, are, as you look at this other pass-through funding, a big part of that, or maybe the whole part of that, is one big project that we currently have had for the past couple of years through state forestry, fire, and state lands is bathymetric LiDAR study, and for Bear Lake and Great Salt Lake, that is a very short window to fly those lakes, where it's just, where they're able to generate a good image. And then if we miss that window, then it's the next year. So this 1.9 million expense would be mostly, a lot of that would be to that project. So we bring that down 1.9, then we just would also bring this 2.4 million down by 2.9. So it's just an offset number, in that, on those lines as well, in talking the impact and just kind of what does reality look like for UGS budget, at the end of the year, looking 3 months into the future. All right, so looking at the session, the general session, this is what funded. This is the funding impact for UGS, a number of bills that came, that really all executive branch agencies have, or executive agencies have to, to fund their operations. The gray shows the supplemental funding received for this fiscal year, and you can see the impact is 191,000. Some of that is the correction for mineral lease to our UGS restricted account, and then there's other funding that came from, just correcting amounts for pay for performance and things like that. And this is just the net impact, across these two bills for supplemental funding for fiscal year 25. If you look at these other 4 bills, Senate Bill 5, which is our base budget, and then there's an impact and fee bill and compensation bill, and then the bill of bills. Darlene talked about geothermal Operation Gigawatt, the 1.75 million. That's where this is. You can also see some other things happening here as far as numbers go. And then you can see, let's see. In this list, we don't have any mineral lease for fiscal year 25 or the fiscal year 26, because mineral lease is coming into our restricted account. But overall, this is where we end up with it. We do have increases to, for compensation for COLA increases that's in our budget. Operation Gigawatt, again, is a very significant number here.
Has that bonus program been a hard thing to project, or has that been easy to do?
That's usually the governor makes a proposal. His proposal was 2% or 2.5%. The legislature approved 1%. But when that is given to us, that is given to our funding mix. So we get some general fund, we get some UGS restricted account, but we also fund, a fair amount of UGS through federal funds and dedicated credits. But we won't be able to use that fund, those funding sources for pay for performance. So really, we're left with a lesser number than what we're actually appropriated. So there is a challenge there as far as how we're funded, within the survey and what we're able to give out. I think for this year, we have great program managers who are very dedicated in doing their own forecasts and communicating well with our finance staff. We've also been able to generate, cost savings through these vacancy savings. But we are left with challenges. Darlene talked about the federal funding pauses and just the uncertainty of the future. How do these look for 26 as far as, these programs, these legacy programs that we worked on with, working with a bunch of federal agencies. But really we can only control so much and focus on that and just what we can do as far as, really good science. But overall, today we're not looking too bad. We're able to support UGS employees at conferences and some travel there for professional development, which is pretty important, for these scientists. So that's the update. Is there any questions anybody has?
Good job from where you were when we had our last meeting. This is a nice turnaround.
Yes, there's been a lot of attention given to this, and I really want to compliment Russ for the time that he has spent providing information and really digging into this, and helping us even kind of get a head start on our FY26 budget. So we're trying to get a look ahead at what that looks like so we can make some staffing decisions. It's been a ton of work. I'd love to send him on a cruise. I think he deserves it. So thank you for your time that you spent in this and your presentation also.
Thank you, Russ.
So,
You come down to beautiful Provo for GSA, right? Almost the same as the cruise.
Okay, so I am gonna skip our program updates because they would take a lot of time at this point. They're all in your packet. I'm just gonna suggest that you take some time and read through your packet. There's a lot of good news in there. We'll always also send you this presentation that you have, so you have a copy and be summarized into some slides. I did get a suggestion from one of our program managers, and how do you guys feel about having our program managers attend our board meetings in the future and maybe do those program updates themselves? I think they'd love the contact time with you guys. I think it'd be great to hear from them directly. It'd be a lot more engagement. I don't really need to be the one standing up here and talking to you for 2.5 hours or something. So if you don't mind if we do that, we'll do that.
That'd be great.
That sounds great. Okay, and with that, Neil mentioned the Water Users Conference that was earlier this year.
I saw those two guys.
So we brought in our rockstar team to give you some summaries from all of that. So if you guys know Paul Inkenbrandt, who's one of our groundwater supervisors and senior geologist, is that your title? Yes. So
Thank you.
you go. Let me put this in presentation mode. So you
All the most photogenic UGS guys.
Oh,
There's every UGS photo. Somehow Paul's always in.
Very
Somehow I wasn't in,
Yes,
in the
right?
recent.
a big group photo?
Yeah.
We'll Photoshop both of us in. I wasn't either. Okay, it's all you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go over our the Utah Flux Network, which is something our program's been working on now for about 4 years. This network has brought in over $2 million of outside unmatched funding, which is spread over 5 years, and $1 million of that is dedicated to personnel funds. And so this is, for those of you unfamiliar, this is a network of specialized top of the line weather stations that are made to measure evapotranspiration and the critical zone and energy coming into and out of the ground surface. And so we got into this because we were doing water rights studies, and the biggest unknown of all of those was the amount of water leaving the system from evaporation and transpiration. And it's a big part of optimizing agricultural water management. And so it's a very important priority of the state. And somehow we ended up being the experts on this topic. I think it was because of our involvement with water budgets. So we started training different parts of our team in groundwater. Trevor helped me build some of the first stations. We hired Catherine specifically with some of her expertise in building weather stations in national parks in the Pacific Northwest, and she's been a great kind of co-lead of these projects. Recently brought Kate Batatian on and had been training her, and she's also great. And now Diane formally our wetlands lead, is now our data wizard. She's magical at everything she does. So Kate and Catherine both have expertise in snow science too, and Catherine's been actively working on a proposal with Matthew Morris in the mapping group and Tara Shreve in hazards to study snow using satellites. And snow is another really important and unknown part of the hydrologic budget. So hopefully they get that NASA grant, assuming it still exists. A big part of what our network was built for was to validate a really important data set that's recently been created by a nonprofit known as OpenET. And it's a group of Desert Research Institute and NASA scientists, and they've brought together all of the best models that model evapotranspiration using Landsat satellites. And this data set is so important because previously all of the state governments had their own way of estimating this really big, important part of the water budget. And this is kind of a unifying data set that is really easy to access and understand by the general public. And so ideally it'll bring all the states together in agreeing on numbers for this big unknown. But Utah didn't have a lot of representation in terms of ground truth of this data set. And so part of our effort is to ground truth these remotely sensed estimates with our weather stations. And so we've been collaborating with a bunch of different agencies. The Colorado River Authority of Utah is a state agency that was recently created just a few years ago. And they're a small team of people and they contract out most of their work. And so they're kind of our biggest funder. We've also been working with the Upper Colorado River Commission. It's a consortium of the states of the Upper Basin. And then bunch of different universities. We've been working with Utah State. They kind of led the charge. All of our equipment is built in Logan, Utah, even the circuit boards of our data loggers. So it's kind of cool to be able to buy and implement equipment and give the money back to the people in the state. And then we've gotten a couple of grants from the Bureau of Reclamation, been working closely with water rights from the get-go, and then more recently, Water Resources and Wildlife, in the Nature Conservancy and Trout Unlimited. They have this amazing outreach group. And so they're the ones who introduced us to most of the farmers throughout the state. We give our data to this international network of specialized weather stations known as Ameriflux. And then we've recently started doing some work around the Great Salt Lake Basin. I'll talk about that. So here's all of our flux stations that we've deployed. We have 11 total now, most of which are concentrated in the Upper Colorado River Basin, shown in blue here, and most of which are in agricultural settings. But we have one at the Bonneville Salt Flats you might be familiar with, and that has helped with Jeremiah Brunau's postdoc and will help with research moving forward there. And then we just recently implemented this Phragmites station. I think I have pictures of some of these. Yeah, this Phragmites station. And we just applied for a Forestry Fire State Lands grant. We'll hear in May whether or not we get that. And that is looking at a patch of invasive Phragmites, which use like 3 to 4 feet of water per year. And we're going to measure, we've been measuring before they treat it, and then Forestry Fire and State Lands is going to come in and treat it, and we'll measure the amount of water use after. And so it'll be cool to see that comparison. And here's our Bluff station and some of the stations we just built this past 2024. And we just built a station in Green River, and that station is in a pivot of hopefully alfalfa. They haven't planted yet. So, and then that is going to have a whole bunch of different instruments in that field. And that's a collaborative effort with the Upper Colorado River Commission. So that consortium of states. And this is just the basic layout of one of our stations, just packed full of instruments with some redundancy. So they measure basic meteorological things as well as These little sensors at the end, 8 and 9, measure incoming and outgoing solar radiation. And the number 4 is the most expensive one. It's like 30 grand, and that measures ET, evapotranspiration. And of course, geologists for scale. These are our soil instruments. Those are measuring heat moving in and out of the ground. We make our data available as soon as we collect it, and we put it on our website. We give it to these international networks, and we've been working with the U of U, who distributes data from Meso West. And so there's all different places. We try to give the farmers all this different connection information, so they also have immediate access to the data. And all of our stations have Wi-Fi, just like everything else now. So they can connect directly to the station via Wi-Fi and download data as it comes through. Yeah, and so here's our Bonneville Salt Flat Station. And despite it not having any plants, it still uses about 26 inches per year at the Bonneville Salt Flats, about how much ET we have. And that station also has a cool little camera and a time-lapse camera that Jeremiah and I set up. And then this Great Salt Lake effort, I mentioned the Phragmites Station, which is here, but it's a collaborative effort with the U of U, and they set up a flux station in the Farmington Bay Playa, even though it's lake is shown here, it's dry now. And then they have also a station up in the mineral ponds, working with that group up there. What's the name of that company? Compass, that's right, yeah. And so Compass has been a great partner with them, and that's all paid for by Water Resources, and they are kind of piloting, trying to measure ET around this very complex ecosystem, or the Great Salt Lake. And so they're focused on wetlands, which is what we're studying, the playa, the mineral ponds, and then open water is going to be the hardest one for them to measure. And so we've been working with Jake Sarago over there at Water Resources, and they're leveraging commissioner funds to try to get a whole network up of ET measurement around the lake, because it's a big part of their models for lake management. And then, yeah, there's our Phragmites Station that we've been caring for. And after building the station and taking care of it, I also want to destroy all of the Phragmites around the lake. And there's our most recent station, our Green River Station. And Catherine's standing next to one of the mini stations deployed in the same field to kind of give us an idea of how things are different in field versus on edge of field. And
what's the crop there?
That is corn, leftover corn.
Oh, okay.
But ideally, hopefully they're planting alfalfa out there. If they're planting corn again, which I don't think they are, we'll have to raise all of our sensors to accommodate for that height.
Wow.
And then, sorry, stealing Hugh's thunder.
Do you have different flux values out of corn versus alfalfa?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you off the top. Well, we haven't measured corn yet. We've just been measuring alfalfa, but we have one site where the farmer rotates between the two. And so when we measure corn, I don't know if it'd be higher or lower or the same. I don't know. Corn almost if you've ever walked through like a pivot of corn, it's like almost has its own ecosystem in the corn canopy. It's like humid and
shades it all on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to. Corn is closer to my heart because I'm from Indiana. So that's the staple crop there.
That's why you can tell there's a humidity difference. Hey, question, what does one of those stations cost? Like, what's the price tag?
The equipment alone is right around 100K.
Okay, good.
And then, it takes a couple days of personnel time, 2 to 3 days of personnel.
To get it set up.
To get it set
But
up.
then once it's set up, it remotely transmits all the data. You don't have to go like visit a data logger and download something. It's all remote, right?
It transmits the half hourly data. We have to download the high frequency. So it's measuring at 10 hertz, 10 times per second for a lot of its variables. And so we go and download that manually every month and a half, clean all the lenses, talk to the farmer, make sure everything's
okay. So you visit the sites about once a month?
Yeah, and we've been training personnel in groundwater to know how to manage these sites.
Okay, great.
We have people assigned to certain sites
Good.
where they're looking at the data constantly and bringing up all these issues.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a great.
I learn more about this system every time I watch you guys present it. So thank you. Much appreciated.
And we just got a grant from Bureau of Reclamation to do a soil water balance modeling work where it's looking at that beta stone and the water components in that. But it's all tied to this understanding of this critical zone. And that's what these stations are measuring. So looking at soil moisture and how that's either infiltrating into the groundwater system or running off of the land or the evaporating.
And it's all tied to ambient temperature and time of year and
Water
solar
availability.
aspect and like the day, and I'm sure it's very complicated and good for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry if I took too long.
I have no idea. What's our timing constraints?
We're doing good.
You guys falling asleep?
Oh, no.
No, I think we're.
Do you have anything else, Darlene?
No, like I said, if you guys will read your program updates on your own,
Yeah.
we'll wrap up, I think, with these.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I won't take too long. All right, so this is the crew, groundwater and wetlands. Darlene came along. This was a field trip we did in Pavant Valley leading up to a water rights meeting in November where they started to put the hammer down as far, or serve warning, serve notice that a groundwater management plan was coming, and they were basing a lot of their projected cutbacks, future cutbacks on groundwater pumping based on the numbers we derived from the Pavant Valley study, which was Greg Gavin and Paul. But we just took advantage and did a kind of a geo tour of both some geologic features and wetlands. That's the canyon range in the back. So one could have gone on and on about that, but I didn't. I showed some discipline, and this is at the lava tubes west of Fillmore. And so the only person in the program not in this photo is Jess, who's here. So and who you met earlier. Okay. Where am I?
Looks dangerous. They're already on crutches.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I kneeled down behind him and Becca. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of, at the last minute, I kind of put in some general personnel and just program news. You've probably been updated as, you know, over the last several meetings as we go, but in October, Diane moved from wetland section manager to data scientist, and she's been just revolutionizing our data management and database structures. And Becca came in as the wetland section manager, and I'm more impressed every time I sit in on a meeting she's leading or talk to her about the way things are going there. So I feel like that's going really well. We were able to hire Jess to work on this large EPA grant that I imagine you talked about before. And then 3 of our ambitious scientists, earlier career scientists, took the PG exam. And I guess that was in March. And then Emily plans to take it in October. And in my opinion, they've all really excelled during their time here so far and are already working at competence level above where they are now, which is they're all at geologist level. As Russ mentioned, I keep really close track of our budget. It's time already to start thinking about decisions we may or may not have to make for the times coming up. And a lot of it will hinge on those 2 Forestry Department and State Lands Tech Team grants that we've applied for. But even if we don't get those, I feel like we're still in really strong shape for the program. We had the same time of tension and uncertainty with federal grants. All of the grants that we had are unfrozen. There are some funds still out there, not frozen, for other collaborators, for example, the BLM, but we're all unfrozen. And we're without being able to plan specifically, we're anticipating that grants will be slower, the process will be slower, and there will be less overall funding available. So we're going to have to count on federal funding less than we do. And that will particularly affect the wetland group, who has been reliant on EPA wetland program development grants. Now, we don't know that that will be cut at all yet. We just don't know. I think it's reasonable to anticipate that though. And Becca and I have been talking about diversifying where we get their funding for a few years. So, okay, work. So I'll just, a couple other things. I don't know if you've mentioned them. So Lucy Jordan, who's worked here for 20 years, she had gone to 1/4 time she didn't want to retire yet, but didn't want to work full time. And she moved out of state. So we switched her to a contract situation. And so she's no longer a state employee technically, but she's still with the program, fortunately. Janae, who started 6 months after I did, so at the beginning of time, will be retiring. Her last day of work will be July 18. Should be close to your next meeting, right? The next board meeting. So maybe you can have her come in and say goodbye. It was, again, probably has been mentioned, Kate won a DNR award,
I
Newcomer of
didn't
the Year.
mention that. I missed that one, actually. Yeah.
DNR wide new employee of the year, Kate Boston.
A specific project one, or what did she do?
Well, yeah, mainly on the Sanpete hydrogeologic study. It's mainly for that, but she's also involved, turned out to be a really key element of the Great Salt Lake Bathy LiDAR project, and as Paul mentioned, of the Utah Flex Network.
Kate befriended all of the farmers,
Yes.
so she could have not only unfettered access to monitoring locations, but really great conversations with people about, these are the boots on the ground folks that know their situation really well. And she was able to just get so much anecdotal information, and she just kind of has her own style, I think you could say. And she was nominated for DNR's first Newcomer of the Year award and was selected. She's quite surprised. So it was really, this was presented in front of pretty much the entire DNR team at a big employee meeting. So it's pretty fun.
It was thrilling. She didn't know,
it was great.
but I had called her parents, so they were listening in from Iowa, or watching in, I guess. I guess it was broadcast. So
She's like, should I go to this meeting? And I'm like, you should probably.
Yeah, you should. Just go. Diane won UGS Employee of the Year. And Rebecca Molinari, this was earlier last year, but she's barely with us. That's a weird way to say it. She's working a few hours a week, helping Claire Spangenberg learn Google Earth Engine mechanism. So Rebecca had her second child and just decided that coming back to work full time was too much. She needed a break. So I've kept her as an employee kind of quietly.
Works for us.
Crossing my fingers. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff. Oh, finally, we have 2 additional manuscripts on the way. You have the Shorelands report.
I do.
And then there's another one coming from the wetland group, their Montane Wetland Assessment. That, by the time that gets out, that will make 12 publications in something like 16 months, which is really, it's a coincidence because all of these projects have been finishing at the same time, but it's got to be, it's our all-time record by far. So that's nice. I'll just talk briefly about a couple studies. This is taken from Claire's presentation on the Shorelands Preserve study, and I'll just hit a couple quick points about it. So the Shorelands Preserve is here on the northeast coast of Farmington Bay. It's a very extensive, continuous swath of wetlands until starting now, mostly undeveloped. So it's kind of sort of representative of a natural state, but it's owned and operated by the Nature Conservancy. And with the new freeway going in, and climate change, and increased housing development replacing agriculture in the area. They wanted to know what they had as far as water coming in, how it might change, and how to best manage it in the future. So that was kind of our mission here. And it was a really comprehensive and multidisciplinary study where we looked at the physical water coming in, the groundwater. Pete Goodwin made a vegetation map, and Rebecca did a very detailed analysis of the history of NDVI, or basically plant greenness throughout the preserve over the past 40 years. I'll only talk about a little tiny bit of that. So this is the extent of the preserve, and the symbols are, you don't need to take all those in, but those are the measuring points that Claire and I established. Some are for groundwater, most are for surface water. So we did a really thorough inventory of just what the main surface water inputs are, where they are. We also wanted to quantify the outflows as well. So all the data are from those stations, as well as the full extent of the preserve. And so we kind of, I should say Stephen Kirby helped us scope this. That was among the last things he did while he was still in the groundwater program. It was extremely helpful, and he set up the concept of a water budget for the wetlands. So it's really not dissimilar from what we do in the groundwater basins. It's just a more focused area, and there's a lot more surface water coming in, and probably a lot more ET overall than a typical groundwater basin we work in. But it's just a matter of, it's almost a mass balance, assuming that the sum of the groundwater flow in, the surface water flow in, and the direct precipitation onto the study area is, in the long run, and going to balance out the groundwater outflows, the surface water outflows, the evapotranspiration, which here will include both evaporation from open water and the plant use, and then any changes in storage. So I'll just look at a couple things from that. And this below it, those is this conceptual hydrogeologic model that Joe Gates made of this kind of the Great Salt Lake margins. It just shows a transition toward more clay-rich aquifers. It shows an upward hydraulic gradient. That's true until about 30 feet. And then you have more of a downward gradient and shallow groundwater that supports the phreatophytes, in other words, the wetlands. So that, I think, is all. And this also shows kind of different vegetation zones at the same time. And so I think the relationship of those to the groundwater system is fairly interesting, and I think we'll be able to delve into that more in current studies. Okay, but let's just keep going. Here's some examples of the data that Claire collected. There's two major inputs. One is Case Creek, which originates on the mountain front, and one is Freeport Drain, which is a surface drain that originates in the valley. Right. So this is the Case Creek plot. We set up continuous monitoring at those stations. And so Claire went out, I think, every other week for quite a while and made manual surface measurements, surface flow measurements. Meanwhile, there was a pressure transducer in the streams, but both of them measuring the height of the water. So in the end, you go back and fit an equation to the relationship between the stage, or the water height depth in the channel, and the flow. And we were able to do that successfully with the help of the USGS for Case Creek and not for Freeport Drain, but we still have very good data and good records of flow from Freeport Drain. Another thing she did was what we called seasonal flow runs, where she found all the major sources of both inflow and outflow that she was able to make manual flow measurements on, and basically did quarterly flow runs, where we would mobilize about 6 people from the program and get all of our measurements in, surface flow measurements in a short amount of time as possible. And this showed some fun variations. The two main creeks, Case and Holmes, peaked their flow during May usually, which is as expected. And you can see that we happened to span, well, this was on purpose. We had flow runs from October of 2021 through November of 2023. And if you remember, 2021 and 22 were all-time record droughts. And so we got to the end of the study and said, well, what do our measurements really mean in the broader context, right? These were two of the worst years on record. And so that can't be representative of the long-term flows in. So we decided to extend it another year, and then we had the record high. So we have that contrast. So we're just kind of, this is a typical Hugh Hurlow blockhead approach where, well, the average of the two is probably the average. And actually, that's not all that unreasonable if you look at climate records in the basin range. Anyway, so we have these huge peak flows. And then what was interesting was that the agricultural and storm drains peaked later and at distinctly different times among those two. And that's actually very useful information if you are building a pond from these surface flows and want to know when it will fill and how much water how big of a pond you want to build, how much water is coming into it when. So this is just kind of the distribution of flows. And by far the total amount of, again, Cays and Freeport are the two main sources, but non-trivial flows in distributed throughout the preserve. Okay, outflow was an interesting problem. This is a typical area at the boundary of the preserve as it moves toward Great Salt Lake. A lot of these flow channels are dispersed. And so much of the flow we think was in kind of diffuse seepage and in channels that were too small to get a physical measurement on. So Claire measured where she could and got this number at the bottom. But we know that's not the total outflow, right? Just observationally. And what happens is, so this is a nice meadow, right? But here is the Phragmites forest at the outer boundary of the preserve. Okay, so it flows out of the Shorelands Preserve into this vast Phragmites forest. So we call that the outflow area. And all these dark green are plumes of Phragmites fed by surface water outflows. So we made the hypothesis that what if the hypothesis was that the Phragmites consume all of the surface plus shallow groundwater outflow from the area. So to test that, we made kind of a mini water budget, where we estimated the surface water outflow as the sum of the ET in the outflow area minus the direct precipitation on the outflow area, which would also have been consumed, and then the shallow groundwater outflow, which was a tiny amount by comparison. So based on that, and we calculated ET, or Rebecca did, in the same manner that Paul showed before, using OpenET and an assumed ET rate for Phragmites. Anyway, so we got a higher number of outflow, about 3,000 acre feet per year more, compared to just using the surface outflows, which is good. It should be more. We expected it to be more. So in the end, I know this is bad form to show a table, but the total inflows, including precipitation, were just over 25,000, and the outflows, and I promise you that's a coincidence, is 25,240. And that's using that second method I mentioned. And we did calculate a separate water budget for just using the surface outflows. But both are balanced within the uncertainty, which is probably fairly substantial, to be honest. So that the fact that these are that close in value actually isn't that big of a deal. We think the uncertainties are at least 15% on these numbers, and that's just the way it goes. But yeah, you can see from the Rose diagram, it's pretty balanced. So it seems to support that hypothesis and to support the methods. So, so yeah, it was important for the managers to quantify the inflows and the locations and timing, as well as the total quantity over the year. They are enacting management programs based on our data now, and I'll show you an example soon. And then this notion that Phragmites may effectively, over the course of a full water year, consume all of the water that's available to it. Well, that water is not getting to Great Salt Lake, right? And that relates to the Phragmites ET study that Paul mentioned, which will be delving into that situation in a lot more detail. We'll work on it regardless, but we're hoping it gets funded. So now just to quickly to go through some new projects. So this is in the kind of northwest part of our study area. Claire had different flow stations around here. And now what they've done is, and this is one of the storm drains, or no, it's an agricultural drain called B5. So it comes in here, and right now it just kind of disperses and basically grows a bunch of Phragmites. So what they've done is redo a berm that was in this area from an old Morton salt operation. And they've actually started filling it now, and actually Becca and Claire are there as we speak, installing monitoring for the inflows and outflows, which are now easily quantifiable because they're going through water control structures of a defined geometry. So this will create new open water and emergent marsh that is perfect habitat for all the critters that come through, and will drown the Phragmites here and will starve the Phragmites out here from water. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. They've got one in place at Freeport. We call it the Freeport Ponds near the main tourist entrance. And I was just there yesterday, and there were heron, geese, ducks. They were loving it. Nice. And it's like this beautiful new marsh that they've grown in a matter of a couple of years. So there's three other similar projects on the way, and we're doing the monitoring of the hydrologic and vegetative changes that these bring about. So we're very excited about that. Okay. Very quickly, I think I've shown this before. This is the Groundwater Data Hub, which we've developed over the past year plus. And I know you're not supposed to show text, but the point is, this is text that will the data are derived directly from statistics in the Groundwater Data Hub that Emily created, and this text will go directly into the wildlife management plan. So we're starting to see the utility of this already. Oh, is it doing this for me automatically? Recording. Okay. So this is just the page. We've added data, hydrogeologic data, certain select data from our study areas. This is steadily growing. It turned out to be a longer and more difficult process than we anticipated. So it'll take a while to fill this out and backfill it from our old studies. Our new studies will come into it pretty straightforwardly. So we'll structure them, the GIS, appropriately. And then we added this in cooperation with water rights. So these are the water right management areas. And now you can go to your favorite groundwater area. I do like Wawa Valley and Severe Lake area. I do like them. And this links to Water Rights' library directly. And oh my gosh, a new publication on groundwater management. No, but there's UGS and USGS and water rights publications.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Oh, and look, we've been working there for a
There's
long
some
time.
good ones in there.
Okay. And then we also, Emily, they updated the can I minimize this without
I'm
destroying the
not
meeting?
Make it smaller. Click that X on it.
Okay,
Is there an X?
sure?
Okay, good.
Okay, so this, we've, Emily upgraded our groundwater level trends page substantially, added a better
Bunch of
color
intervals,
scheme. So these are, we differentiate, there's both UGS and USGS data on
Squares
here.
versus circles, yeah.
And that ought to be, oh, there they are. Yeah, that's shown here. Right? And so there's 10-year trends, 15, which I don't think have any UGS data. Oh yeah, they do, in Snake Valley. And 30-year trends, which are all USGS data. So there's statistics on them. If you go to any particular well, Emily figured out how to do, she basically does statistical tests on them to show that there's a statistically relevant trend and then calculates the slope over that time period. So this is a 30-year rate of water level change. That's a little bit goofy with the jump there, but that's interesting in that this is actually not all that uncommon. Looks like it's in Snake Valley where you have a downward trend, a wet year, and then it does no net help in that the downward trend continues just at a higher level. So anyway, there's more dramatic examples. Yes. Yeah.
I
So
mean, if
that's-
you look at so not all of the elevation scales are the same.
Yes,
Each
that's right.
well has its own elevation scale. So I mean, what is this, 45, 50 feet of groundwater decline in
Yeah,
30 years?
in that area, it could be, depending on which well you look at, it could be over 100. But you can and to that note, you can download the data, right, and see what and plot it on your own scale. The scale, the Y scale, that's just, we've talked about that, and that's just one of the limitations of putting this out.
So this got the attention of the legislature, and they asked UGS to come in and present this. And I think the scale of some of the groundwater decline, I think one of the interesting things about this website is we put this information in reports, right? But nobody, I'm not gonna say nobody really plows through that because I don't want to say that. But I think to have this kind of information where you're looking at yellow and orange and red and a few blues scattered across the state, you can click on a well. Anybody can do this. You can click on a well and look at that decline and rate of decline, and it is telling a story. It's telling a really compelling story. So this standing up this groundwater data hub is, I think, a big deal.
So yeah, Emily and Rachel Wilmore and Mackenzie done the bulk of the work on that, and they've been really outstanding.
You'll have a question.
Okay.
So I read in the package, our board package, about additional ground subsidence mapping and fissure mapping. Is there any thoughts about correlating that with this?
Yes, that's been the goal all along. That program has gotten started a little later than this, but I guess she has a draft statewide subsidence map. Is that right, Paul?
Yes.
Are you talking about Tara?
Tara.
Yeah, Tara's been picking out hot spots and, yeah, so that's all part of the big grant with the Utah Department of Emergency Management and FEMA. And she's already got a statewide map going and focusing in on some key study areas like Milford, which is an active groundwater project, and
Cedar City? You know?
yeah, that area, Barrel Enterprise, all kind of hot spots. And then that smaller region in South Davis?
Yeah, Bountiful Woods Cross. Maybe there's more, and that's the only place they've looked so far.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the original concept. These were actually co-funded with a single building block. It's just they took an extra year to hire that person. But the original vision was to literally co-plot the groundwater decline rates and the land subsidence rates. So I don't know what her schedule is for developing an app.
We still haven't
Whether that
decided
will
where it's
live-
gonna live.
What's that? Yeah, it might live here, it might be independent, but regardless, the data would be co-plottable.
I have a question. You mentioned Snake Valley, and the board went on that field trip about 10 years ago.
Yes.
Whatever happened to that water grab deal out there? Did it disappear?
I can comment on that.
Oh.
I'm actually working on it as an expert witness. And the Baker Ranches are suing Granite Peaks. And it's actually in the Fillmore court.
Mhm.
And so it's like an active litigation.
Okay.
That is different though than the original big scale
The pipeline.
Because wasn't that
pipeline
like
from Las
Vegas?
Yeah.
That got shut
Yeah.
I
They actually-
remember hearing that. I thought it was completely dead.
They actually, I think, finally withdrew their water right applications, not just said, we're tabling this for now, so.
We still actively monitor that whole.
Yeah, we're still going there.
Yeah, that was a really interesting project.
And it's a really interesting area in that you have distinct areas of development, groundwater development, and areas that are undeveloped. So you can really make that contrast and analyze the climate-driven groundwater signals and then compare it to those where there's pumping. I still think somebody out there, somewhere has a secret plan to pump all of the water out of there somewhere else. So I think, there's nothing we know about at this moment. But so I think it's still an area to still keep monitoring. Okay, you want to connect clock? Time to go?
Is that, I don't know, do you have more, or is there?
I have nothing left, but any other questions or discussions?
Yeah, I don't want to
Great.
stifle conversation or, questions about this. I mean, this is, our groundwater and wetlands team does amazing
they
work,
do.
and they are all over the state, and they are providing a lot of really important data that is relevant now for decision-making that is happening now. And we have a ton of support from Joel Ferry. I had a conversation with him about the Great Salt Lake, and that is what keeps him up at night. And so we have job security for groundwater and wetlands folks.
I'll ask another question about subsidence. Are there any places around, like inhabited places that are being affected by subsidence, other than Enoch, where we went 2 years ago?
Woods Cross. So, Woods Cross. So groundwater withdrawal in Woods Cross is causing housing issues. So there's settlement of roads and streets and homes and infrastructure, and that's something that Terracon, so Rick Chestnut's team was working on that.
Because the people pumping the water are not the same ones as having the subsidence, so how's that damage and liability rolling for the state?
I can't speak to that, so
Yeah.
you can ask
Measure
Woods
it.
Cross about that, or Rick Chestnut, your fellow board member has given several talks about that as well. So, but it's not a project I'm following, no, so, yeah. But again, we've brought on an INSAR specialist, right? So we can more finely read, ground deformation over time without doing field work. It's all satellite imagery. It's, changes in, fine scale satellite distances over time. Satellite passes over the same place, every however many times a day. It takes a reading, and so we just, go back through time and compile all of that, and you can look at, whether areas are uplifting or, subsiding. It's great for landslides. We're looking at maybe using it for rock glacier movement. It's super useful. We're going to keep Tara really busy.
She's picked up some landslides in there, and you can use the elastic response of these aquifer systems to get at aquifer properties across the state. And so she's also working with us on deriving aquifer properties from the elastic response.
Now you've got me started. So in an agricultural area, and you've seen this really clearly in Snake Valley, there's a sawtooth pattern. If you do continuous monitoring, right? So groundwater levels go down while they're pumping and recover. Usually that sawtooth pattern is superposed on an overall downward trend because they're taking water out of storage. So I was actually on the thesis committee of somebody from University of Missouri that did his PhD on Parowan Valley on that. And they showed the land surface record. And it was identical to the pumping record in terms of its sawtooth pattern superposed on a downward decline. So it clearly showed the correlation between movements in the land surface and the seasonal groundwater pumping. And so when you're on a downward trend, you're taking storage out of the aquifer long term. And so that, depending on the physical properties of the aquifer, that can lead to compaction. And if there's differential compaction between one area and another, that's what leads to the surface fissures. In a nutshell.
Potential permanent loss of reservoir storage.
Yeah, wow. Oh.
Good times. Okay.
What does UGS do? We inform, hopefully, really good policy, right?
Yeah, and I can just comment. In my work, I use data from the UGS all the time, whether it's groundwater, which is a lot, and then the mapping group. So
Awesome.
it's really important work.
Great. Well, help us understand if you need different tools or better tools or how it's working for you. So thank you, you know? Yeah, I mean, having someone who's like a user of that is really helpful to have on our board. So thank you. Thanks, you guys, for the awesome presentations.
Yeah,
Thanks to
thank you
our
very much.
board for your time and attention for all of this.
So,
Yeah.
is there any old business or new business? If not, we can adjourn by acclamation. Adjourn.
Thank you. Yeah, so feel free to email me with any thoughts you have. Open doors, come visit. We'll plan so I think we have an August meeting and then our field trip. So we'll work on some ideas for that and take a little poll and see what you guys think about all that.